Hello there, Math 126 fans. I'm going to try to make a short video about each test prep as we go throughout the term. The first test prep was actually calculus skills. You can see it right here on my materials page. I'll post solutions and then eventually I'll post this video. I really think maybe for this video, rather than me going through the solutions, it might be better for me to talk about the skills necessary in Math 126. So I'm going to switch topics and have you go here and look at those solutions. It was derivatives and integrals. It was just an opportunity for you to meet your TA, practice some of those skills, and you can read through those. But I think it would be more helpful if I gave you a little bit of the lay of the land based off of 20 years of teaching this course and the mistakes I've seen. So I will keep my webpage up there, so I'm going to say a few things. So just before I made this video, I was thinking, all right, what are the skills? Chapter 12, we're introducing vector skills, then we'll talk about lines and planes and introduce some surfaces. The challenge there has nothing to do with calculus. Maybe I'll add one more here, graphs. Now for my other courses, I've only been making videos for the last 9 months, but I know I'll put some links somewhere in here when I post this video that'll appear at the top. But the skills I see students struggle with are arithmetic skills. I actually made a series of, I noticed that some students are struggling with things like this, not knowing how to simplify that. I actually saw that in office hours. I noticed there's a bunch of little things. So if that's what's happening, if that scares you when you see that, or when you see this and you're unsure what to do, I do have a series of videos on that. Nothing's too small, but I can't do that in class. Okay, so arithmetic is holding some people back. Algebra is holding some people back. There's been some worry about completing the square, things of that sort. I can make something on that. I don't have as much direct practice with those pieces. That's part of what I'm building. Trig, I certainly have several reviews on this. I have this trig fact sheet you can even see on this page. So you don't need to search elsewhere. I wouldn't be even searching my YouTube channel. I would just go to my materials page. I have a collection of materials that's specific for this course. The one thing that I kind of have been noticing more these last couple terms is there's a huge uneasiness with graphs. I've noticed that occasionally I'll tell students, do you know what that looks like? Or do you know what this looks like? And not everyone does. And rather than criticize people for not knowing that, it's something you can remedy. I certainly have this on and you can click on these review sheets, and I have this list of derivatives and integrals. But you can also navigate back to like my 125 page. You can see I have test preps there. That I taught 125 in the fall, and that's when I first started making these sorts of videos. There's only a few graphs. I made a video on the graphs you need to know for calculus. It's a small handful of things. So there's no reason you couldn't even have all those in your note sheet. But at some point, we need to commit them to memory because they come up so much and they're helpful. This will happen again here. So I'll link to that video on graphs if you want to review that. You'll need it a little bit when we get to 12.6. You'll need it a little bit in chapter 14, and you'll need it a lot in chapter 15. So those aren't really the calculus skills. That's why I thought, as I was thinking about, students have been asking, what skills do I need? Don't go just review calculus, because that's a small piece. The calculus stuff is usually quicker. There's a little bit of derivatives in chapter 13. Derivatives, I have several reviews for that. I have videos, so I'll put a link to that. There's algebra, there's arithmetic. This is usually an uncomfortable space for people because you're using all the vector skills, but that's self-contained. Like, I'm teaching that in this course, so you don't stay on top of the homework, and you'll have that. When we get to chapter 14 and 15, that's when the skills from calculus start to appear a bit. Of course, I'll be reviewing, but this is where, if you're worried about derivatives, this will test your understanding of derivatives. You'll have to do the quotient rule and the product rule and the chain rule. And then we get into this big discussion about max and min. And I've been making review material for Calculus 1, 2, and 3 the last few quarters, so I have a review on Calculus 1, Max and Min. It might be good as we go into section 14.7 if you review the 2D. This is stuff I always say. I just want to give you a little bit of a taste of what's coming. Okay. So if you're worried about something you saw, like if you're worried about your derivative skills, you'll need them soon. You'll really need them a lot in chapter 14, but you can make a little note to yourself that, okay, I'll need to do a little refresher. Again, all of that stuff you could find here. Calculus 1 review that goes through in 2 pages, kind of what we did. Calculus 2 is all about integration techniques, so that's a little bit longer review. And I also have more. Chapter 15 is a lot like integration. You'll do a lot of questions where you have like a region bounded between 2 graphs, and you'll have to correctly label it. Now that's a huge skill in Math 125, the ability to label a graph based off of X, what's this length, what's that length, how to label it based off of Y. It's something I emphasize heavily when I teach Calculus 2. So I have a bunch of review material for Calculus 2 on that, but it's really, it's more important than almost anything else. The ability to just work with a graph and understand what X and Y are and work with the coordinate plane, that's more valuable than almost anything we're doing. So if you are weak in that area, you want to spend a lot of time on that because you're going to continue to see graphs in all your science and math courses. Anyways, we'll need that to describe regions, and that will lead to integration. Now the integration we do, I've taught this course so many times, I know every problem. There's not a single homework question that has partial fractions and trig substitution. Trig substitution, it doesn't sort of naturally arise in the types of examples we do. Trig substitution comes up when you're integrating within circles a lot. We just don't have many problems like that. In this course, partial fractions is very important. It just doesn't come up in this course, in the homework. Because of that, I always tell students I'm not going to test you on skills that you haven't seen in the homework recently in some form. So those won't appear on my test either. I always have to give a little comment of some of the double integrals that we talk about. You can set up in multiple ways. And if you choose to do it in a poor way, it might lead to a bad integral. But if you do it the way that I will be suggesting, you won't lead to those. The other techniques you definitely will see. By parts and substitution have to be like breathing. We do those so much in all our courses. And there's going to be a section we have to do some trig, but I can review that when it happens. So when chapter 15 rolls around, you might need to review some integration. I have a lot of good stuff on that in my opinion, so we can check that out. The last topic is somewhat independent and doesn't require that many skills. It's new and foreign to people, but there will be derivatives. They'll be thinking in terms of graphs. There'll be a tiny bit of max and min. So you can see the part that actually has the most calculus skills. It kind of pops up in chapter 15. Usually in the spring quarter, that's not quite so bad because most students took Math 125 last term. So it's fresher in their mind. But if that's not you, that just means you'll need to start a little extra early. So those are the skills. I'll put some links to some of those things in terms of what you need. If you're struggling with some bit of arithmetic as you're doing the homework, you got to make a note of that. You really have to say, why did I miss this? And then ask me about it, and I probably have something to help you. Like I said, no question's too small. The biggest constraint I have is time. I can only do so many things, and I have to hit the main topics, but I want your questions. All right, hope that helps.